All right, everybody, back with another one. Today, we're just going to take a look at two simple topics. I want to dive not too deep, but a little bit on the situation with the chemtrails, because recently RFK had come out again saying something about them and something about how his department's looking into them and trying to get to the bottom of, what's going on there and maybe even addressing it as a Health and Human Services concern. So we're going to take a look at that because it's a trending topic again and dive a little bit into, that situation and look at it from a different perspective that I think most people are not talking about. And I try to always kind of bring everything back to our constitutional rights because a lot of times people get caught up in the weeds about what the conspiracies are and how everybody in the government is doing them wrong, and there's some big brand collaboration uh you know with certain members of government that are trying to you know kill everybody or enslave everybody, and all of that is true because there's always evil in the world. So the world is inherently evil. It'll always be, that's why, in the Bible it says, be in the world, but not of it. Because the world's a naturally evil place, and it's important for us to separate ourselves from it, but still exist within this realm. And it's true that there are always evil forces that are trying to control us, enslave us, kill us naturally. But in America, we have rights, and the rights that we have are only upheld when the people force the government to adhere to those rights. A lot of times people today get caught up in the weeds about all this nonsense, and it's true, and they have the right information a lot of the time, not always, and they are on the right track, but they're going about it, I think, in a way that's never-ending battle. It doesn't really get them the results that they're looking for. And I'm very results driven. I think that if there's a problem, you should try and do your best to resolve it, not just keep talking about it, complaining about it, and saying how unfair everything is in life. There's nothing wrong with pointing out injustices, but don't become a victim by them. Instead, take action and make sure that those injustices are corrected and that you receive justice. And in America, we have constitutional rights. So we're going to take a look at how this technically interferes with our constitutional rights and how there's a case to be made about that. But before we get into that, I want to take a look at this news article out of Texas about a potential new law that they might be passing and how this might impact the future of social media in this country. This could start a chain reaction that changes the game for social media in America. And we're long overdue for something, some sort of regulations to come in place from the government to where they impact social media. Typically everything, the way it works is there's like an innovation period, and things are kind of go through like a wild west period where it's a free for all. There's tons of innovation, very little regulation from the government, and everybody's kind of just climbing all over each other with whatever that industry is. We have that going on right now with cryptocurrency, where you have a lot of companies popping up constantly. Everybody's got a meme coin, every celebrity, even the president, and there's really not much regulation about it. In fact, many cryptocurrency companies have lost. I mean, the token companies themselves have won, but the SEC and the government officials that are trying to regulate them have lost in court on multiple occasions, biggest one being Ripple, because they cannot regulate it since it's not a security, and they're looking at them as, assets. So there's this wild west period that's going on right now with cryptocurrency where everybody's kind of just doing whatever they want and getting away with all kinds of things. I mean, there's even the people who become momentarily famous. That girl, I forget her name, I think it's Haktua, and she created some meme token with a bunch of people, and they ended up, I guess pumping and dumping and taking that, basically robbing a bunch of people of their money in some scheme. Now, I don't want to accuse this is, alleged because I don't know the whole situation. I don't really follow stuff like that, but to my knowledge, I read an article about it, and I think it had something to do with, she hooked up with some, business people, business associates that set up a meme coin for her and used her fame to, market that meme coin, and ended up being illegitimate and ended up, costing a lot of people their money because they invested in this thing thinking it was going to go up. So there's a lot of gambling going on in the crypto world, and it's going through its period of, wild, wild west. But the same thing is kind of happening with social media. Now, there are a lot of regulations around social media currently, but not as much as there are around other forms of media that have been around longer. If you look at the television, radio, different forms of media outside of the internet. You have the FCC, which regulates that stuff. Movies, Motion Picture Association, they give movies ratings, and if a movie has an R rating or higher, people of a certain age cannot go see it technically legally. So there's a lot of regulation there. There's a lot of regulation with the FCC around certain things that you can and cannot say on the radio and on television, and certain things you can and cannot show visually unless they have a certain rating or they're on certain cable channels like HBO and things like that, subscription type channels. So there is a lot more regulation with those forms of media, than there are with social media. Social media is more regulated by the companies themselves. Like X does their own regulation for, based on what Elon Musk wants, and Facebook, Meta, based on what Mark Zuckerberg decides for his platforms and Instagram. Um, so it's sort of self-governed, but there's really not much government regulation around social media right now. Although I think we are, because it's been around for quite a while now, so is the internet. I think we are headed to a point where there probably will begin to be some sort of regulation from the government on how we use these platforms because we have enough time with them. Basically the social experiment has been going on for about 2 decades now. Think about like Facebook was invented in I think 2003, back when Mark Zuckerberg was in college. You're talking over 20 years now for at least Facebook. Instagram's a little younger, and X and some of those other platforms. But the social experiment has been going on for a few decades. We have enough information as to how it impacts society. Biggest one being the millennials, because we grew up with it for the most part. Half our lives without it, half with it. So you can actually see the impacts it has, before it's in your life and after it's in your life for the same person because that person has grown up both with and without it. Gen Z is a little different. They mostly grew up with it their whole lives. And now we're heading into Gen Alpha, which is the latest generation that is growing up with it from birth, which is going to be both good and bad. It's going to be good in the sense that they're going to be they're going to be the generation that's so fluid and so naturally connected to this form of technology, not just social media, but iPhones, iPads, all that stuff, computers themselves. They're going to surpass every generation in terms of their abilities, manipulate, innovate, and use the technology way beyond any generation before them because they have it in their lives since birth. Many of them are going to it's going to become like an extension of their body. Not talking about like, the implanting and things like that. I know some of that stuff what Elon Musk is doing, but I'm talking more from a sense of the fact that it's in their lives their entire life from basically the time they're babies, when their parents sit them down at the table and put a screen in front of them, or go out to a restaurant and hand them a tablet so that they will leave them alone and be quiet. This generation, the positive effects of that are going to be that they're going to surpass any generation before them on how to use the technology, how to innovate, how to make it better for the future generations. The bad thing will be they will never know a life without that stuff. Not to mention all the negative things that come of constantly having a radiated device around you. The radiation could definitely affect them over time. Maybe they end up having gene mutations. Maybe they end up developing cancer more frequently. Not to mention, screen time, constantly staring at a blue light screen and focusing your eyes on a close object. There's a reason that your eyes are both near and farsighted. It's so that your eyes can change the depth in which they put things in focus. If you're always looking at something close up to you, eventually that does mess with the eyes to where, you have trouble seeing things far away. Um, and even close up too. It could get hard to see things closer as well. But there's a lot of negative impacts that are going to come of generations using technology to the extent that we use it. It really should be used as a tool, just like anything else, right? A carpenter doesn't walk around with a hammer on his hip all day, every day, constantly when he's working, not working, sleeping. But for some reason, we have this tool with us all the time, in our pockets, clipped to our hips, on our nightstand when we're sleeping. When we wake up, it's right there. It's the first thing most people touch. So there is a deep connection with this tool that really needs to be rethought as to how we use it. It's easy to escape. It's easy to use that technology to fill up your day, but there's a lot of bad that comes with that too. I saw a saying, and I think this is so true. If the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. And I think that there's definitely something to that. It's a distraction to a degree. If you're always on it, if it's always a part of your life, at some point you can't say, "Oh, I'm just, using it to increase my business, make more money, or whatever, it is that you're doing with it." After a certain amount of time, you've gotten pretty much all you're going to get out of that thing. And it's more about consistency with that stuff. So if you're just doing it a little bit every day over time, you will reap the benefits of it. But to constantly use it day and night, first thing in the morning, last thing before bed, there's an addiction element there. There's an addiction element that you are obsessed with it and it has taken over. It's now using you versus you using it. Go back to, or not even back, just we need to go to a place where we use the technology that we have to better our lives. If it's making us worse in any way, it's not being used correctly, and then we need to change how we use it. I'm not one of those people that says we need to go back to the Stone Age, everybody go back to the woods, and go back to the way things were before computers. Because no civilization in world history, besides the Puritans that came to America, has ever gone back to older forms of technology for everything, tools and everything, when newer, more effective forms were currently invented and existed in their life. People don't go backward in life, they go forward. The only reason the Puritans did is because when they came to America, they had to leave their great nation and everything that it had to offer in terms of technological advancements at that time. They had to leave all that behind to come to a barren land, which would become America, um, in in order to pursue religious freedom, and then obviously eventually create the new promised land. But that was a fluke, and that was because they were on a mission from God. Other than that example, I don't know any throughout history where people went backward with technology. So we're only going to go forward, especially with the advent of cryptocurrency, AI, Web3, all that stuff. We are going into a future where that stuff will be a part of our life. But you have to look at it like any form of technology. When guns were invented, we didn't, modify our bodies to make one of our arms one with the gun so that we always had a weapon at our hands disposal at all times. We made holsters and put them in the holster, or we put them in a safe, or we put them in a gun box, whatever. We have it as a tool that we use when we need it, and when we don't, we're not using it. It's the same thing with phones and laptops and tablets and all this stuff. We need to separate ourselves from those things, not implant them in our body to become more one with them. I'm not for a future of metaverse where people live inside the goggles or live inside a fake reality, because I think that there's something inherently evil about that. God created this reality, and if man's going to create a new reality, it's almost like man's trying to play God. And I can't see at this point how that would have a positive effect and further God's plan for the world. So I'm not one for that metaverse future reality where people implant computers in our brains and just blink, and that's how we're able to search on the search engines and stuff like that. But I do see a lot of positive benefits of having social media, and I can see how God has used it in this life with many different things for disseminating information, getting it out to the masses, allowing people of like-minded beliefs and ideology to connect all around the world. Even if you've never met in person, you're able to find each other. So there are benefits to that. The power is always in the numbers. If the people are united, no matter where they are, if they're united physically in person or virtually on the internet, being united is better than being divided. And I look at the social media and the internet as a tool where you can either waste your time or you can unite, build relationships, build community, and use it as a resource for researching and finding out information, or, for your business, marketing purposes, things like that. Other than that, you really got to be careful how you use the technology. We're headed into a world where government officials are starting to seriously look at the impacts of how this affects our children, and that's what we're going to take a look at now. An article from Texas legislators that are looking to pass a law. Yeah, so this is it. They're looking to pass a law banning Texans under the age of 18 from having social media accounts. So the bill's author, Representative Jared Patterson, called social media the most dangerous legal thing minors can access.
House passed a bill to restrict kids' access to social media. House Bill 186 would prohibit those under the age of 18 from having accounts on social media platforms. KFU's Daniel Perot is live at the Texas Capitol for us. And Daniel, state lawmakers say the bill could address mental health and safety among young users.
That's right, Jenny. State Representative Jared Patterson, who authored the bill, says the legislation is needed to help with what he believes is harmful and addictive behavior that social media drives. He says it is the most dangerous legal thing that minors can access, and it's leading to some alarming mental health issues. Under House Bill 186, users under 18 will be banned from having social media accounts. Platforms will also have to take measures to verify users' ages. The bill would allow parents to ask platforms to shut down their kids' accounts, and it empowers the Texas Attorney General's office to go after any platform that does not comply. Patterson compared the regulations to legislation lawmakers have previously passed requiring age verification measures for pornography sites. Echoing comments made by the former Surgeon General last summer, he also compared social media to the addictive nature of cigarettes.
I believe that this is the modern day cigarette. I think that we're going to wake up at some point in this country and realize what we have done to an entire generation of kids that are on this highly addictive product called social media. And I think that that's why there's a lot of concern about that.
Consequences aren't just for adolescents, it's for...
The Texas House has also passed House Bill 499 by Representative Mary Gonzalez, which mandates social media companies display a warning label about the link between minor social media use and mental health issues. The warning would appear every time a user opens the app. Critics have raised concerns that these restrictions would infringe on people's free speech or parental rights. Both bills now go over to the Senate for consideration. Live at the Texas Capitol, Daniel Perot, KVUE News.
So there you have it. I agree with the assessment that children under a certain age maybe should be not using social media or limiting their use dramatically compared to what people are doing today. There's a lot that goes into that. You know, the human brain doesn't really fully develop at this point where we are scientifically today. They say 25 years old. The goalpost is always shifting, so I'm sure in 10 years from now, they're probably gonna be telling people it's 35. But either way, mid-20s is probably a little bit late in life to be getting on social media. I would say if you're a young person, regardless of if you're 11 or 18, if you're still living at home with your parents, you got to kind of adhere to their rules. And if they don't want you to have a social media account, you shouldn't have it. Now, obviously, all parents are built different. And that's what I think this really comes down to. The government really shouldn't be passing laws like this because this is a matter that the parents have to handle. Parents have to do a better job parenting their children and ensuring that they don't create social media accounts, but also that they're not giving them the access to do so. If you have, you know, your child doesn't work, doesn't have a job, doesn't have money for their own phone, who's giving them the phone? The parents are. They're adding them to the plan. They're getting them their own phone. They're claiming it's because they want to be able to reach them if they're out. And, I understand that because, we don't live back in the 80s anymore where, you just told your kid to be home at 5 o'clock for dinner and they would be home at 5 o'clock for dinner. You want to know where they are. And some parents are getting their kids flip phones. I see that's a big movement now. There is a lot of people who are switching back to flip phones because they don't want the internet on their phone. They would rather just have it on a computer that they can access um, and then put away. But in terms of, a phone, they would prefer to just have the phone available to them for calls and texts. And I completely understand that approach too. And then there's some parents that say, yeah, but then they don't have the ability to see their kid. Like on the iPhone, you can track where their location is. So they get the smartphone for that reason. And it could be a difficult situation to where you want to find a happy medium to let your kids have a phone, give them that responsibility and the freedom to be able to go places and know that they're safe because you could, track them or you could have them check in with you periodically by calling them, vice versa. And I don't really know if there's a right answer for everybody. I'm sure there's a different answer for each household depending on how you raise your children. But I would say at the bare minimum, it comes down to the parents parenting their children in the right way. A lot of parents, and this is the major problem I see with Gen A, the millennials now who are the parents of Gen A are using the phones and tablets and technology as a crutch to sort of be their assistant parent. And they're putting them in front of these screens to just be able to look at their screens, go on their social media accounts or take a break from parenting, right? Because, adult life is so hard, they need breaks in between. But whatever you allow to influence your children will have an influence over your children. So when you send your kids to public school for 6 hours a day, the teachers that they're around will definitely have an influence over them and will have some authority over them because you're giving up a portion of your authority to these people to babysit your kids during the day. Same thing with technology. If you give your kid a phone, they're going to use it for what you tell them to use it for. And then after they're done with that and they get bored, they're going to start using it for the other resources that it has available on it. So you're letting that form of technology have influence over your children and you're letting it also have authority over your children. Not to mention, you're giving them access to a wealth of knowledge that they may not be ready for mentally. They may not be mentally wise enough to control their curiosity as to use it in an appropriate way versus just using it based on what's at their fingertips. And this is why you see probably an epidemic by now with Gen Z talking about how many of them suffer from porn addiction. And it's all because the technology is in their hands. They have access to those websites and they get curious and they go on them. And this is why we're seeing a generation of young people that are addicted to pornography like no generation in history. I talked about that in my previous videos and ways around that. You can set parental controls on your phones to block any pornographic website. There's also apps that stop you from, searching certain websites. Parents, just have to do a better job as to how they raise their kids and what they allow to influence them. And that goes for everything. What people around them are allowed to influence them, family, friends, where they're allowed to go, what they're allowed to do. It really just encompasses the whole part of parenting. It includes everything, and that also includes technology. You have to be the governor over your children. You have to decide, what they're going to get to do and see, and how they're going to, have to spend their time. If you put pressure on your children to constantly read books, or demand that of them, give them a quota for the week or the month or whatever. They're going to spend more time reading books than they will on the phone. But if you let them just do whatever they want, they're going to look for what's the most fun, what's the easiest, and obviously the coolest gadget, phone, the internet, is going to draw their attention. You have to be the parent. You have to be the one that uh, sets the standard. And also in how you do things too. If you're always on social media, if you're doing, you're a 37-year-old mom doing TikTok dance videos, your 11-year-old daughter is going to be influenced by that because they're going to look at your example. So maybe how you use the technology will also, determine how they use it. So I don't know if this bill's going to pass officially, to the end. I don't know if it's something that really should be done because the government now is infringing on the people's rights, the parents' rights, really. If a parent does decide their child is mature enough, and they want them to have a social media account for their business because they're a young entrepreneur, this would now stop that. Um, so, I don't know how this is going to go, but they've been trying to do regulation on social media for many, many years now. It looks like they might be getting closer. I guess we'll see how it plays out, but um, it's a difficult situation because this really should be up to the parents to decide and to also do the right thing so that the government doesn't have to get involved. But I think the lack of involvement from the parents is why the government is looking at getting involved in this now. Anyway, that's it for that topic. I want to jump into chemtrails now. Take a quick look at a video from RFK Jr., who was asked a question about them and his response. And then we're going to dive a little bit into that just to, sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together and create my case as to how Americans should approach this versus the way that we've been doing it over the last, 10 or 20 years that this has been a topic. But let's take a look at this clip from RFK Jr. now.
Continuously peppered on us every day. Bromium, aluminum, strontium, it's sprayed in our skies all day long. And I know you've talked to Dane Wigington about this. He seems to be one of the experts in the field.
Is there a question?
Yes. How do we stop it?
That is not happening in my agency. We don't do that. It's done, we think, by DARPA. And a lot of it now is coming out of the jet fuel.
Yes,
so, those materials are put in jet fuel. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop it. We're bringing on somebody who's going to think only about that, find out who's doing it, and holding them accountable.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
So just a quick video on that. Yeah, RFK, he's talked about this in the past. This is not a new thing for him, but now that he's holding this position in HHS, he's coming at it from a health place where how does it negatively impact the health of Americans, and what can his department do to help change it or stop it or involve himself in whatever way he can. See, ultimately, I think it would probably come down to Trump making a final decision because it's a national matter. It's something that's happening all over the country, except a few states. I think like Tennessee banned it, but it's not a new topic. It's been going on for a while, and it's been openly talked about, as you've seen from when he was at the Council on Foreign Relations. He gave a speech. I think that for a while it was under wraps because it was a secret government project, and it made people suspicious because contrails, which are normal from planes when they cut through the sky, they do create water vapor in the sky that may make like a stream or something, but those spread naturally quickly and dissipate. That's why sometimes you'll see a plane going through the sky and it'll have a contrail behind it, but as the plane's flying, you can see the contrail disappearing right before your eyes. That's not a chemtrail. A chemtrail would stay in the air for a while because it's something that's being sprayed, so it's going to sit there and slowly fall to the ground. And as that happens, you really wouldn't notice the deterioration right before your eyes. It would take a while. Typically with these, they spread across the sky. But here's an article I actually wrote over a decade ago about this. You can check it out. It's actually still listed on the website. I haven't worked for that website in a very, very long time, but it's still listed on the website, which is cool that you can still see that there. I'm glad to see that they're still around. But this is the website, Guardian Liberty Voice, Chemtrails or Contrails, how to tell the difference. I talk all about that in this article. And here's the article on Guardian Liberty Voice, Chemtrails or Contrails, how to tell the difference. I talk all about it in here. And here is the, let me see, the date in which I wrote it, 14. So over 10 years ago is when I published this article on here. And some people commented back then. I guess I never looked at these, or maybe I did. I don't remember. But I put a bunch of sources because that's what you're really supposed to do when you write an article. I notice a lot of times today on different publications, people don't source their research and they'll just write an article, post it online. And, that's why we're having problems with, information not always being factual or correct, because a lot of it is just people's opinions, and we're not calling them opinion pieces. We're just calling it, news or whatever. But you're supposed to source your material. And so I sourced a bunch of stuff down here, which we'll get back to in a minute. But I wrote the article here, talks a little bit about the differences, but basically, in a nutshell, it's what it is. Chemtrails contain a bunch of, aluminum and all different types of, particulates that stay in the sky. And the intention, at least what they claim, is that it will create a barrier or layer in the sky that will reflect the sunlight away from Earth. Now, anybody with a logical mind would question, why would anybody do that? What would be the intention? Why would you take God's creation, the sun, and God's other creation, the earth, and God's creation, the plants and the, people and the animals. And why would you disrupt that if there wasn't a evil agenda? You don't take what God made and try and fix it because then you're playing God. What you do is you try and enhance what God already gave us. And that's how we, better our lives, but not we build on top of what God gave us. We don't try and undo what God gave us. There's no logical reason to block the sun from the earth other than to try and hurt the earth or hurt the inhabitants of the earth. They'll claim it's because of global warming, but that's been disproven now because a lot of that global warming stuff has been going on for decades now, and it's been decades, and several times they've said that we should have had, world floods and all this stuff, ice caps melting and world floods and all these crazy things, and it hasn't happened in 3 decades now. Not to mention the Bible says God will never flood the earth again. A lot of that stuff is nonsense. Now we've kind of gotten to the idea that there's some sort of agenda there to, do some sort of negative harm, impact to America or, the people or the plants or whatever to try and, take control of certain things. It might have a lot to do with trying to take control of the food supply so that they can only be grown in facilities controlled by corporations or the government so that those members have control over the people. If they have control over the food, they have control over the people. And then they can enslave them and get them to do what they want. Who knows? But there's clearly an agenda there, and it's not good because you wouldn't do this for no reason, and there's no good reason to do it, so it must be evil. But I did cite some stuff here, and if you notice, two of these websites, or two of the links rather, are HARP and HARP Archives, because at one time there were websites for HARP. I don't know if they still exist. They might have taken them down. I think they did a while ago. But if you actually go to the link, there was an actual website for HARP, and it's here on the archive, on the Internet Archive. A lot of times people don't know that you can actually archive certain websites. I mean, any website really, but many of them are archived on the Internet's archive database. So you can go back and look at websites that aren't even up anymore and see what they used to look like or what information they used to have. But you can see that this is a research project where they were looking at many different things, and also look at DARPA's website, which is what RFK was talking about. So this is DARPA's website that RFK was talking about, and if you actually go to their programs tab, you can actually search for different programs that they're involved in, different research topics, and see what programs are going on for those. Now, I don't think there's anything in here about chemtrails because that's still technically under wraps, but you got chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. So click on that, for example. No search results. I don't even know why that's a category, but something like air. If you clicked on air, you might see air combat, evolution, artificial intelligence reinforcement. So I think these are different projects that they're researching. The program will develop dominant tactical autonomy for multi-ship beyond visual range air combat missions. So that's what that project is going to do. And you could just keep going or look for a new category. But DARPA is not a conspiracy. That is a real organization or something in the government. It's not really an official department of government. And it's, like many departments of the government now, they're not constitutional. They shouldn't be there. And they're sort of operating rogue in many ways, where they're keeping their secret programs and stuff from the government, from Congress, and from the president, which is absolutely unlawful. The president is privy to everything, all projects that are going on. There are no secret programs that can be, kept from the president because he's the president. He's the highest power in the land. And so he has to be involved with all that stuff and approve it or, decide against it. That's why he's the head of the executive branch. But Congress is also privy to that stuff too, unless it's something, very specific that's being kept from Congress for a specific reason and for a short duration of time. because, maybe the president feels that Congress is jeopardized, which is probably some of what's going on now. But unless there's some person or something compromising the government, the Congress and the president are supposed to have all this information, and there should be no secret programs or secret departments that the president and Congress are not aware of. So it's not a conspiracy. DARPA does exist. HARP does or did exist. And, there are government departments that are involved in secret studies and, secret social experiments where, they're trying to figure out things. The problem is that they're keeping that from the American people, and they're using our taxpayer dollars to partake in these programs, a lot of which are being used to study um, the impacts on the American people and how the government can, modify certain things to have more control over the American people. That's where the problem is. But let's just take chemtrails, for example. And this is what I really wanted to get into that I think is a different take that a lot of people are not talking about. Just from a realistic, constitutional American standpoint, chemtrails are not lawful. And here's why. If you look at real estate law, now real estate law is one of the highest laws in the land because it's a constitutional right for an American to own property. And we are allowed to own the land in this country. When you own land, real estate law teaches that you own the land. And a lot of times people think you own the land, meaning the grass and the dirt and the house that's built on it. That's true. But what a lot of people don't know is you actually own all of the dirt underneath that land, going down to the core of the earth. You own all the mineral rights. You own everything that's encompassed in that land as far down as you can possibly go. But you also own everything in the airspace directly above your property, your lot, all the way up to the heavens. And they actually teach this in real estate school, in real estate law, that person owns their air rights. It's part of your property rights. So technically, planes aren't even allowed to fly in your airspace over your property if you don't want them to. Now, it would be a huge headache. Every person, every American would have to go to the government, go to the courts, and petition that planes are not allowed to fly over their property, and you'd have planes redirecting all over the country. So it doesn't really make sense to enforce something like that because they also fly thousands of feet above people's properties, which a lot of times you don't even see them. They're above, clouds, or if you do, they're very far away, and they can't really see you or what you got going on. But as far as like a privacy issue, yeah, it's illegal to fly things directly over people's property because you're invading their airspace, which is their rights. They own the air rights. So I think that's probably the approach that we would want to take with this as Americans, petitioning the government, saying that Americans own the land and the air rights because that's their private property, and they do not consent to these chemtrails. So you're going to have to not do them over all these properties. And if enough Americans got involved with this, eventually, they'd only be allowed to do chemtrails in a very small portion of the country where the land is owned by the government or privately owned, and that just wouldn't make sense because also those particles spread. So even if they end up in the airspace of a person on their private property, that would be an intrusion as well. And I don't know why no one's talking about this. I think it's probably because most people don't know the laws or real estate laws, and a lot of realtors, they just kind of go about selling or buying, helping a buyer or seller with a property deal, and they don't really know the details of the law that they in the industry that they practice. But you would think that more people would be petitioning this because there is a way to put a stop to chemtrails state by state right now by having the Americans that live in those states petitioning the government saying that this is an invasion of their air rights, and that if they want to do this, they're going to have to pay the people to use their air rights. So now you'd have all these companies doing chemtrails having to pay money to every person's airspace that those chemtrails invade. And this could be a way to stop this from happening without waiting for a politician to do the right thing and put a stop to this. Looks like RFK is on the case, and maybe Trump will do the right thing as well. But Americans have the power. We hold the power, not the government. The government works for us. So if you decide you don't want chemtrails being sprayed over your property, and you can confirm that, maybe take photos or whatever, showing that the chemtrails residue that sits in the sky is above your land, you might have a case to be able to go to the government and petition this. And that could be a way that the Americans take this power back from these secret government programs that are doing this stuff, or, whoever it is, just corporations or other countries, who knows. But that is a way that I see forward for Americans to put a stop to this, because again, we hold the power. And a lot of Americans don't even know their rights. They don't even know what's in the Constitution. They don't know the Bill of Rights. They don't know, the amendments. So they just kind of go on living every day thinking whatever the government tells them they can do, they can do. No, no, no. You have inherent rights, and your rights come first. And we tell the government what they can and cannot do. And then whatever rights we don't have that's delegated to the states or the federal government, those are the ones that we have to adhere to, that they create laws for. And that's where this whole country picture comes together. That's where America works, together, basically, where the people, states, and the federal government equally share powers. But we hold the most power because we are a nation where we govern the governors, we govern the politicians. We're the ultimate authority. And a lot of Americans forgot that long ago. It wasn't passed down to their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. So now we live in a world where we are just constantly thinking the government has all this power and we have to do whatever they say, and we have no rights. You have rights, and your rights actually come first. But I see this as something that should be looked at a little bit further, and I think it's a great case, especially if enough people get behind it to, make some sort of movement with this, because there's a lot of people that are unhappy about these chemtrails. But we don't have to go down a conspiracy rabbit hole to get to the bottom of it and find out who did it, and then, do something crazy to them. There's always going to be evil people in this world. Don't worry about that. Just seek justice in a righteous way, and those problems will go away. They'll either be resolved or resolve themselves. But if enough people stand up and say, hey, let's just look at basic American rights. You're invading our airspace. We own this property and we own the air rights above it. You didn't get authorization from us to use those air rights. Therefore, you have to stop your chemtrails. I see this as a path forward. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm saying that if enough people band together, they could petition in each state, and you might see more states actually getting rid of this stuff. But anyway, that's my little take on that. It's a different approach. I don't really see anybody talking about it online, so I just thought I'd share it because I think it creates a good argument for the people taking back this power and for us getting it done quicker than waiting for a bunch of politicians to do the right thing. But anyway, that's it for this video. Just wanted to talk about those topics, show you that article from a decade ago if you ever wanted to go take a look at that. My work is published on that website and many others, as well as my children's book that's out now on sale, Little Boy Full of Love. It's a great book. It's actually in the ad at the end of this video. Take a look at that so you can find out where to purchase it. And there's also information about that in the show notes. It makes a great gift for anybody you know that has a kid. It's got a lot of good reviews because it's a wonderful, book that's clean and nice and wholesome and teaches great life lessons. Something you really don't see too much today in children's books. But we have that, the apparel shop, and Amazon storefront, and a couple other things we're working on. So check all that stuff out in the ad at the end of this video. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And put in the comments anything that you liked about this video, didn't like about this video. Everything is welcome here, even criticism. That's fine. I love having an open dialogue with people. And, as long as everybody keeps it nice and clean, you could say whatever you want to say here. But also put in the comments if there's anything in the future that you'd like me to do, topics you'd like me to talk about, or videos specifically that you'd like me to react to or comment on. Put that in the comment section, and I'll look to make those future videos. But that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son. and it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. You know, we highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, you know, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, you know, buy a children's book as a gift. You know, definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now. And like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, you know, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, you know, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throw in your own, you know, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, you know, put on a better party. You know, health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop, and these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, you know, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, you know, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodssoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag and it says free and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, you know, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future, and I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.